We'll begin right at 1, so we'll let everyone kind of trickle in for the next 30 seconds. So make yourself comfortable and we will begin soon. Okay, so we can go ahead and get started. Thank you again for attending today's session. We are back with session number 2 of our e-commerce series with Shopify today. I'm Alicia McLeod, Program Coordinator with Western Entrepreneurship, and we're so excited to be bringing you 4 sessions, a part of Shopify's e-commerce series. Today we are back with Emily Turner, a Global Enablement Specialist at Shopify, as we dive into the next session, creating effective and beautiful product pages. If you missed Tuesday's introduction to e-commerce, you can be sure to check that out on our IV webinar page. It's up there now to watch and kind of catch up. As always, we want to help out with your time here. So if you attend all 4 sessions, live sessions of the Shopify webcast series, you could be eligible for a LinkedIn skill badge and or co-curricular record. So we have some amazing content today. We'd love for you guys to engage with us. So be sure to do that. We just ask that you keep your questions for Emily to the end, where we will open it up to the audience for some Q&A. But with all that said, Emily, I'll hand things over to you. You're on mute, Emily.
I knew that was going to happen to me at least once. Hey, everyone. I am so excited to be back and be chatting with everyone today about creating effective and beautiful product pages. We are, again, going to leave the chat open. I have a couple questions for the group that I'd like to engage with everyone in as we're working through it. But as Alicia mentioned, if you could please save your questions either for the end or drop them in as we're going through in the questions tool, it will just make it easier for us to get to them at the end. And if we don't, I can get those resources over to Alicia as needed. But we will jump into our agenda for today. So before we jump into it, product pages, photography, and SEO are a huge topic, and there's a lot involved. And so today's session, I'm going to cover off some of the basics and a few best practices across the board, but this is a big topic. It's one that's constantly changing and evolving. So this is by no means an all-encompassing session. And it's definitely something that if you're interested in it or you're building out a site, I would suggest poking around and continuing to learn more as things change, and they change so fast. But today we're going to touch on SEO, what that is, why it matters. And then we're going to dig into what actually are the components of a product page. If you were here on Tuesday, I told you that product pages are probably the most important page on your website. And then we're going to really focus on product descriptions and product images themselves. So with that, we're going to jump into a brief overview of SEO. Again, SEO could probably be its own topic for a webinar, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time here. But to kick us off this morning, I'd love for everyone to drop into the chat what you think SEO is and why you think it's important for e-commerce or for websites. Yeah, a couple answers. I'll let everyone keep entering them in, and then we'll jump into those answers. Yeah, so a couple of really good answers. Helps potential customers find you when searching for a product, search engine optimization. Yeah, exactly. So SEO is short for search engine optimization, and search engine optimization is actually a measurable and repeatable process that is used to send signals or communicate from your site to different search engines. And it basically signals where your page should land when someone searches Google or Yahoo or Bing in their index. It's important because typically people don't go past the first page. I don't know if you do, but I very rarely go past the first page of my Google search results. And the other big benefit of having good SEO rankings is that they are free. Unlike Google AdWords or other paid marketing campaigns, SEO is not dictated by the amount of money that you spend necessarily with Google. So it's an easy way to potentially boost your traffic. So what are SEO comprised of? They are algorithms that are comprised of basically hundreds of different buckets of criteria that the search engines are looking for. And each bucket gets a score associated with it, and that score determines your final rank. So when you're optimizing your search results or your site for search results, you're trying to get the highest score in as many buckets as possible. So the big 3 buckets, though, that are the easiest to impact and are worth more points, so to speak, in the scoring are quality, trust, and authority. And so quality, and I'm going to use Google as the example because in doing my research and just in general, Google's the common one that I use to search. So they're going to probably be the one that fills in my search engine terms. So I'm sorry if anyone is a big Bing user or Yahoo fan. But what they're looking to measure is basically, does the site offer something valuable or unique or interesting to their searchers? So for example, if you were selling t-shirts and you use the same description of blue t-shirt, crew neck, as every other seller out there, you're not going to score as high as if you were offering something unique like blue t-shirt, 1,000 thread count, comfy, easy iron, whatever it may be. Trust is the second bucket, and it's another important one to be aware of when you're getting your site to rank in Google. So Google doesn't want to just show any website to its searchers. It's trying to show the best possible website. And so it likes to know that it's trustworthy. One of the things that Google does and other search engines do is they penalize sites or stores that consistently get poor reviews. So this is why it's important to have positive customer reviews and to encourage customers who have maybe bought your products or bought your site to leave a positive review. Because if you either don't have reviews, it can't trust it, or if you do have reviews and they're all negative, then eventually Google is going to suggest that you're probably not as trustworthy. Something else you can do is get other sites to link out to you. So whether those are media sites or other Instagrams or even just happy customers that post about it maybe on their social media and link out, all of that gets factored into your trust score. Finally, the last of the big 3 buckets is authority. So Google is trying to show sites that are popular. They want to show the most popular t-shirt site to people looking to buy t-shirts. That's why we use Google. And so you, in building out your site, need to kind of convince Google that you are that popular site. And so this bucket is essentially checked a couple of different ways, but the easiest way to think about it is the number of people that come to your website. The more people that are coming to your website and spending time on it, the more authority you have as being a more popular site. And so how you can drive people to your site is done by building a social network, potentially getting people to link out to you. You may have to use some of your additional marketing to really drive people to your site. That's a bit of an overview of SEO and search engine optimization. One thing I would suggest to keep in mind, especially if you're a new business, and I know when we did that poll on Tuesday, a lot of people were thinking of starting a new business or they were just planning to get started. And SEO rankings take time to build. They're not going to be an instantaneous source of people finding and landing on your site. So something to bear in mind that they're great to supplement your marketing, and you should think of it as you're building it out, but it's not going to be the end all and be all of your marketing strategy. And so with that, we will jump into, now that you've got people to land on your site and they're looking at your products, we're going to talk about product pages and what makes them successful. So there are 4 things that make a great product page: your product, your brand, your copywriting, and your page's design and user experience. Today, we're mostly going to chat about numbers 3 and 4, as you guys probably know more about your product or what you want your brand to be, so that's not really where I can help. When you're thinking of product pages, almost all product pages have the same 8 components to them. They have a descriptive product name, an identifiable image or images. They have zoomed in views of images. They have price, including any additional product specific charges. They have clear product options, product availability, a clear way for you to add the item to your cart, and concise and informative product descriptions. So we're going to dig into a couple of these. A few of them are bigger topics like the images and the product description. So we're going to save those to the end as we're going to do a bit of a deep dive, but we will jump into product names. So product names essentially tell people what your product is. And if you look on the right side of my slide, you'll notice that there's a number of different products listed. And yet, even though you're not really seeing any images or reading anything descriptive about it, you likely know what these products are, especially if you use shorts or leggings, mattress, right? They're pretty self-explanatory, which is what you want them to be. Ideally, you want them to be kind of catchy, but still easy enough for people to understand so that they'll remember them when they're recommending them to friends or family or just online. And product names are important because they are used in your SEO when you're looking for search terms. So an example we'll use is the speed shorts for Gymshark women. If I was looking up running shorts, this is something that Google would be combing through all the possible sites that it links out to and realize that, hey, speed shorts, it sounds like running shorts, like let's move that one up higher on the list potentially. So that's product names. The next couple of things are around price, options, and availability. So again, in the chat, if you wanted to drop it in or not, but basically, question is, has anyone ever been shopping online and you add items to your cart, you go to checkout, and you realize that the prices the whole time were in US dollars and you don't find out until you're going to check out? I'll let everyone drop that in. Yes, and it is extremely frustrating. You may or may not, I occasionally end up not buying items and things like that. So this is why price is really important to have on your site. It's super frustrating. And so your price needs to be easy to see and understand. So if you're going to post a price on your site, you ideally want it to be in the right currency. And you want the price to be pretty clear and transparent for the most part, especially when you're selling products. E-commerce is not the place to kind of wait 2 or 3 more pages to show someone how much it's going to cost. With the exception of if you're offering services that vary in price depending on a number of factors, you can have apps with Shopify that allow you to install them and request quotes or things like that. But a general best practice is that people want to know how much they're going to pay for something, and they don't want to have to add it to their cart to find out. Which brings me to my next point, using tools that allow the users to see them in their correct currency, at least while they're shopping on your site, so that I know as somebody buying in Canada that if I'm buying from your site, I understand the Canadian dollars that it's ultimately going to cost me at the end. And then you do want to try and ease common purchasing anxieties. So you'll notice under the example of the Parker necklace, it says pay in full or 4 interest-free installments. So if you have more expensive or higher ticket items, using things like installments or free returns and calling that out on your product page or near your pricing is a really easy way to calm any kind of shopping nerves before someone's ordered it. Another great incentive you can use when you're doing price, if you have high ticket items, are to show that compare at price or original price if you're doing a sale. So if you, let's say, Parker necklace originally $85, you can actually have that visible and then be charging $65 so people know they're getting a better deal, which helps with conversion. The next part of it is options. And so these should be easy to see and choose from. Some examples would be like color, size, things like that. If you're building on Shopify, we call them variants internally. So when you're building it out, which we'll talk about at the very end, that's what you would be calling it. But they're essentially just options so that I know I can choose the color or the size from a single page versus having to go and find the right product page for my specific shoe size or the color of shoe I want. Finally, when you're talking about availability, so the other side of this is people don't want to come to a site, think that they're going to be able to buy something, and then find out there's none left in stock. So making sure that you're pulling off, you're taking down any items that are out of stock, you're not having them on your website, because it just creates a poor experience for customers and a lower trust score with your customers as well. Additionally, you can use things like low stock notices though to incent people to buy. So that's a great option if you only have one left in stock. Being able to show that might make me want to make the purchase before time runs out. And then the other thing is pickup availability. So if anyone has been doing like a ton of curbside pickup or anything like that, and you've been trying to do it, there are some stores that do it really, really well, where you can look up the inventory at that specific store on the product page. That's what you'd like to be able to show your merchant or your customers, versus if I add all these things to my cart, I get all the way to the end, I'm checking out, and then I find out that I can't actually pick them up at the same store. And now I have to go back to my cart and start removing things. That creates a really poor experience for me as a customer. The final part before we jump into product descriptions is the call to action buttons. And so we talked about this on Tuesday in terms of landing pages, and they're equally, if not more important, on your product pages, because you want to motivate potential customers to take that next step, add to cart, and ideally move through your checkout process. And so you want your call to action buttons to be eye-catching. We talked about the fact that you'd like it to be a different color. Maybe it lights up when they've made a selection like Allbirds does. It's action oriented. It tells them what they need to do. So you'll notice before the Allbirds button, before I've selected a size, it says select a size. In the call to action, I actually can't click on anything until I've done that. And then again, if you're able to ease those common purchasing anxieties, this is a big thing for people, especially if you can get it as close to your call to action as possible. I have 30 days of free returns, which eases my mind, and I'm more likely to make the decision and actually complete the checkout, knowing that I could return it. Though, if you are like me, I don't think I've ever really returned anything I buy online, so I'm likely to keep it, but at least I know if I was willing to return it, I do have those 30 days to return it, and I'm more likely to check out. Okay, so we're going to jump into product descriptions. Like we chatted about on Tuesday, if you attended the session or if you've had a chance to watch it, when you are writing content, you're really trying to make sure you do at least 3 things. And this is definitely important for your product descriptions. The first is to know your audience, right? You want to know who you're selling this to. You're trying to tell them a story about your product. And so your story is only going to be compelling if you know who your target audience is and what matters to them. Additionally, the messaging hierarchy, right? What do people need to see on the page to be comfortable making the decision? And you want it to be from most important to least important and as concise and clear as possible. So if you take a look at the Gymshark example on the left-hand side of my screen, sorry, you'll notice that they have all of the features of high-waisted, supported ribbed waistband, seamless shading, contouring patterns, all of the actual features and are highlighted really easily so that if I was looking for leggings, I could quickly see all the details. And then underneath it tells me a bit of a story about how I could be using that, which leads us into our final point of selling features and benefits. You want to make sure that your features are framed in a way that provides benefits to their problems, right? So in the example of the Lively description, they have the line about a soft elastic band that moves with you versus, for example, the waistband of your jeans, which is maybe a little less forgiving and it's not as flexible or easy to move in. So that if you were wearing jeans and reading the ad, you might be like, wow, I would really love to be wearing comfortable track pants right now. So that is at a high level. In terms of actual best practices, again, we've talked about it a little bit around blending benefits and features, right? Including images with product features and examples. So on the top right, you'll notice, if you can see it, there's a dot grid, right? They've included the description of why it's important and also an image that goes along and kind of shows what that specific feature is. So if you're selling something that has a few really specific features, you'll see this a lot in shoes as well with their soles, depending on the features that the soles are supposed to have, including examples of how to use it or ways people have used it is another really great way of kind of social proofing it, so that if someone is looking at the keto bars example, right, there are all these recipes of what I could do or how I could eat or consume my keto bars, and I may be more likely to buy it because I'm inspired by something I see there. Product reviews, having customer product reviews, ideally positive ones, are always a great way of social proofing for other customers. And so you can use a number of different things to get those product reviews, but especially if you can get things that are a little bit more specific. You'll see it a lot in clothing stores. Lululemon is an example of this, that they, with their site, have built out so that when you leave a review, it says, how tall are you? What kind of fit does it have, right? All of those details that would help a potential future customer make their decision about what leggings or what pants they wanted to buy. And then finally, product specifications. This is a really big thing to include in your benefits. And so 76% of shoppers want to see specific product specifications. So these are things like spec sheets or a sizing chart, materials that it's made out of, how it's supposed to fit. Again, in clothing, you'll see it where it says like the model, the person wearing the clothes, these are their dimensions, this is the size they're wearing, so that you can kind of measure up to it and understand like exactly what you're going to be purchasing. And it just makes it easier for customers to know what are they buying, and it prevents some of those issues where you see someone ordered something online and it's supposed to be a full size item and there are these mini tiny little things that they didn't quite have that full description. They also improve your SEO rankings, as we talked about. So they're a really big thing. And if you think back to our SEO example at the beginning of our session today around the t-shirts, if you were selling t-shirts and you were using that same generic description or product specifications as everyone else, you're not offering anything unique to Google or the other search engine searchers. So that's why it's really important to have powerful and descriptive product descriptions that include some of those specifications, right? Your thread count, if that's what matters to you. Like, you guys will know your products better than other people. And so making sure that you include what makes your product unique and what makes your product special in the product description. Okay, next, we're gonna jump into creating beautiful product images. Transparently, I am not an expert photographer. So if you do have photography questions, I'm happy to try and find resources, but I am not the best expert on taking photos. But I do have some great best practices for you. So when you're thinking about how to take product photos, there are two approaches that people can take. Most commonly, when you're just getting started, you're probably going to do it yourself. Versus if you are building a brand, or once you've started to get some traction with customers and you want to kind of up level your website, often people will hire a photographer and do a photo shoot that they are then able to use those photos. Photographers often will edit them for you and everything to make it a little bit easier. But if you are just getting started, or it's something that you're planning to do on the side as a bit of a side hustle, I'd recommend trying to do it yourself for a bit. You can get some very inexpensive backgrounds and things online. The next thing is, you'll notice a bunch of the photos online and online shopping tend to be against white backgrounds. It's just the best practice. It lets some of the colors pop, and it really lets the product itself be the star versus having different backgrounds. It just makes it cleaner and easier to use. The other part when you're thinking of taking your product photos is you don't want to just have one product photo. You want to have multiple angles. You need to have it zoomed in, close up. But people are less likely to buy something if there's just one photo, for example, of a shoe and it shows only one angle, versus if you can see all the angles, especially if you're shopping online at a new store that you've never bought from. So let's talk about some best practices now. So those are the basics of taking product photography. Those are the approaches you can take, and just some general best practices if you're going to do it yourself. Now, when you're actually loading and building your site and you're thinking of your images and how you want to optimize it, there's a few best practices. The first is you want to name your images descriptively. And what that means is, when you save photos or when you take photos with your camera, they're saved as image 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? And that's not how people think or how people are going to search for things on your site. And all of those image names and things like that actually get built into the underlying map of your website and make it easier for people to search and find you. They also talk to Google or other search engines. And so it's really important that when you're saving your photos to be uploaded onto your site, you're renaming them to things that people are going to actually be searching for, like red baseball hat or blue t-shirt, versus that image 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The next part is alt attributes. And so alt attributes is an example on here of that's the image SRC equals 2012 Ford Mustang to alt 2012 Ford Mustang LX. That's an alt attribute. And alt attributes are text alternatives to images when a browser either can't properly render them or they're needed for web accessibility. So even occasionally when the images have rendered, depending on your website settings, you can actually still see the alt text when you hover over it. Where alt attributes and the importance of them comes into play is, again, in adding SEO value to your website. Having appropriate alt attributes that include the relevant keywords, so red baseball hat, blue t-shirt, can help you rank better in search engines. And it's one of the best ways to get e-commerce products to show up in Google image and web searches. So a couple simple rules for alt attributes. Describe your images in plain language, right? Just like you did for your file name. Don't give your alt images complex names or hard to search ones. You're trying to make them as easy as possible. If you sell products that have model numbers or serial numbers, you make sure you use them in the alt attributes. Third, don't overstuff your alt attributes with things. Don't write like blue, comfy, amazing, cheap, inexpensive, high quality t-shirt. That's too many things. And so it's going to overdo it. And then finally, we're gonna talk a little bit about them on the next slide, but don't use alt attributes for decorative images, right? Search engines may penalize you for over-optimization. In terms of adding it, so when you're uploading, and alt attributes are super important, you actually can add them again right within Shopify. So when you're uploading your image, if you have an existing image in your Shopify store, you can just click edit on the media and add alt text. It's down here in the red. Okay. The next part of it is image dimensions and file size. So this is important. Has anyone ever been to a site and the site takes so long to load that you've given up and closed the site before? Yeah. Yes, got a yes. I find it happens a lot too with like blogs or when people have a lot of ads, things like that. So 50% of consumers roughly say they won't even wait 3 seconds for an e-commerce page to load. And because of the size of images that people are loading onto their websites, the average page load time is actually increasing. And in terms of lost revenue and what that means, so for Amazon, as an example, Amazon obviously does trillions of dollars a year, but if their pages were to slow down by 1 second, they would lose $1.6 billion a year. I think that number is a little old from the stat I pulled it from, but it would still be a significant amount of revenue for them to be losing for a 1 second difference. Also, Google uses your page load time as a ranking factor in their algorithm. So if you have images that take a long time, they load really slowly, or they drool down the screen and take almost 15 seconds to load, you may actually lose your customers on the way. So how you can prevent that is by decreasing the size of the image files. And this isn't decreasing the size of the image itself, it's decreasing the actual underlying file size. That's a hard sentence for me. It can be done in most Photoshop tools so that the easiest way to do it, and I can post this in our little chat, is if anyone wants it, is when you are using Adobe Photoshop, for example, there's a save for web command, and most other Photoshops will have that as well, which actually reduces the file size and is keeping it small. Ideally, you'd like to keep any of the images that you're going to be using for your website below 70 KB. It can be difficult, but this is now where having the right file size comes in, or having the right file type also comes in. If you are using a hosted site like Shopify, just as a side note, we actually automatically compress images. So this may not be as much of an issue with Shopify sites, but just as a general best practice, when you're thinking of e-commerce, you do want to use those smaller file sizes whenever possible. And again, leads you to your next type of file type. There are 3 common file types that people use to post images to the web. They are JPEG, JPEG. They are GIFs or GIFs, depending on how you like to say them. And then there are PNG files. So JPEG images are the most traditional, bit of an old school type of photos, and they are the de facto standard image for the internet. They this is because they can be compressed the smallest. So they're the easiest, and you can still keep good quality images, but have smaller file sizes. Unlike GIFs or GIFs, which are lower quality than JPEG, they're usually only used for more simplistic items. They can be used for video, but they're not ideal for a website because they actually lose some of their, you'll lose file space essentially with them, right? They're bigger files and they have lower quality images. So not necessarily a win-win. I guess it's a lose-lose. And then finally, ping images are becoming super popular as an alternative to GIFs because they support more colors. And unlike JPEGs, you can resave them over and over and over again, and they still keep a really high quality photo. However, they are getting a little bit larger. So that was a lot of information in terms of file size and dimension. Here are some best practices. Again, in most cases, JPEGs, probably your best bet. Don't use GIFs for large product images. And then only pings are great, but only if you can get them in like a ping 8 format. Otherwise, again, they become a bit too large. Those are the first two. The second part around image optimization is thumbnails, right? A lot of e-commerce sites use thumbnail images. These are on your collections pages and things like that. They're also used to, when you're searching Google Images and things like that, they're used in your SEO process and in your search results. Thumbnails are great and they're super useful to showcase your catalog. Just be conscious of the fact that if they're too large, they can also cause your page to load more slowly just because of the sheer number of images that may end up on your page. Again, from a Shopify perspective, we optimize all your thumbnails. So this isn't really a concern if you're building your site on Shopify, but it is a good best practice to remember to try and make your thumbnail sizes as small as possible. And the other important thing when you're thinking of thumbnails is do not duplicate the text of your actual product images. You don't want to use the same alt text. And if you're just getting started, a best practice actually might be to leave alt text out of your thumbnails altogether. It will ask you if you want to include it and you can say no. The seventh item on our list of 10 is to use image sitemaps. We're not gonna talk too much about this. They're a little more complicated and I wouldn't normally recommend worrying about it when you're just getting started. But essentially what they are is if you're on a site that isn't hosted or is hosted, but Google can't read your images, this lets you tell Google what the images on your site are. So we won't go too deep down that rabbit hole. 8, beware of decorative images. We talked about it a little bit at the beginning, but when you have a lot of decorative images on your page that don't necessarily serve a purpose, I've used the example from Gymshark. These are decorative images in the back. They're not product specific and they work because their site is fast enough. But if you have too many, they can actually slow down your load times and put you over that 3 seconds. That's going to potentially cost you customers. So beware of using them. They have a time and a place, which is not to say don't use them at all, but just be conscious of it as you're building it out, especially on your product pages. 9 is if you're using content delivery networks, again, Shopify customers don't really have to worry about this because we are a hosted solution. So if you're using a hosted solution in general, this isn't really an issue for you. These are just places where if you're not using a hosted solution, where people store their files. And so because they're storing their files somewhere else, it slows down the delivery speed. So it makes it hard for people to load your pages. And again, we're all about page speed. Otherwise, we'll lose people. And then finally, you want to be testing your images. And so just because you take your product images at the beginning of building your site doesn't mean that those are the only images that you want to take. You're likely going to make changes to your product images, not just as your product grows and iterates, but also to make sure that the product images are the ones that are capturing the most attention. So if you've done marketing and you talk about A/B testing or things like that, you can do something similar with your photos, right? Where if you change some of your product images, does it impact your sales? Do your sales go way up that month? Are they maybe static so it doesn't there was no impact, or are they dropping, which means you probably should swap them back to your old ones, right? So you can do some trial and error to understand what are the best product photos for your product, what are the best angles or images, or how zoomed in do they want it? If it's makeup, do people want to see it on multiple skin tones? Or if it's hair, like different hair tones that you could use it. Clothing, shoes, those angles become really important. People want to know what they are buying. So take the time to test out a few, leave them up for a period of time. Just give yourself a reasonable window, right? If you upload an image to test it today, you probably need to give it a few days for it to actually take effect versus, oh, nobody bought anything on Thursday, so my product image wasn't successful, even though maybe you had lower web traffic. Okay, so quick recap of everything on the product photo page. When you're taking product photos for your site, you want to make sure you're taking lots of different product images, lots of different angles. You're trying to keep those file sizes as small as possible, bearing in mind that Shopify will compress them for you. You also want to make sure you're taking them on a white background, or a background that really lets your product shine. And when you're thinking of alt text for your site, you're building it to be descriptive, and you're naming your product images with descriptive names rather than leaving the standard camera generated names. Those are the biggest pieces to take from that. So let's jump in to what you may be wondering, which is, great, Emily. So I've learned about what my product description pages look like and what I want my content to contain, but where do I go about building it, or what are the pieces of actually building a page? So we're going to chat about that. Within your Shopify admin, I can only talk for Shopify. To be fair, I don't know how other sites build it, but I would imagine it's pretty similar. So within Shopify, in your admin, you would go to your products. You'd be able to click add product. And on this page, you're going to be able to enter in all that information that we talked about for the most part, right? You're going to be able to enter your descriptive product name, your great product description that's going to contain the relevant facts. It's going to talk to your audience, and it's going to be selling both features and benefits in a way that shows them from most important to least important. You're going to be able to add media. And when you do, you're going to remember to add your alt text so that you're not just selling a blue t-shirt. You have a blue t-shirt crew neck in your alt text so that people can find it. Again, also helps with accessibility. You want to make sure that you're including your price. If you want a compare at price, you can include it there as well. I don't have it on the screen, but you're going to be able to mark down your inventory, how many you have in stock. If you have multiple locations, if you're just getting started, maybe you have some of your stock at your parents' house in BC, some of your stock at your home in London, and you're shipping from both, right? You can have that stock listed out as well. Variants, so again, those are those product options. So think sizes, colors, anything like that. You could set up your shipping weights so that it's going to auto calculate shipping fees for people as they're checking out your specific products. And then these last two, I did want to spend a second chatting about. Can you guys see my mouse on the screen? If you can't, under the add product in bold, you'll notice there's a number of sales channels. And for anyone who's here on Tuesday, we talked about within Shopify, you have the ability to manage and sell across all channels. And so when you're building out your products, you're going to be able to choose where you want to be selling these products. Are you going to sell them online? Are you going to sell them in store? Are they going to be available to Pinterest or Facebook, on a shop app? All of those things are controlled so that if, let's say I was doing a big launch and I was trying to really push people to my Instagram or my Facebook site, I could just launch the product on those sites potentially. Usually people, they'll launch them on their online store. The other thing to think about is if you're doing a big drop, you have something new coming out and you're going to launch it at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Friday, and you don't want to have to change it manually from draft to active, which we're going to talk about in 1 second. You can schedule the availability on your online store so that you don't have to be there to manually click it on. You could be in class, you could be at lunch, you could be doing anything really. And the product will automatically become available on your website at the time that you have marketed and advertised that it will be available for purchase. The final thing is, if you're building a new product and it doesn't need to go live at a specific time, As you're building products in Shopify, they're always built in draft so that you can make changes, make edits without it being visible to your customers. Once you're confident and you've hit save on your product, you can just change that status from draft to active, and that will push it out to all the sales channels you've selected in real time so that your customers can begin shopping. With that, that is the overview of creating beautiful content on pages, on product pages. And so I hope you enjoyed it, and I will turn it over to you and we can jump into some questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Emily. We do have, so just a reminder to everyone, I saw a couple questions in the chat. If you want to go ahead and just pop them into the Q&A, then we know where to look, where we're asking Emily our questions. We do have one here from Nick already. I think it was around the best practices for images. He said, should you have a couple of lifestyle images and also some cutouts on a white background?
Yeah, so it depends on what you're selling. Lifestyle images are great if you're selling a lifestyle product. Having those images of how people can use them or be wearing them in real life is a great option. So is if you have customers that have worn them and they love the product and they send them back to you, if you can compress them into a better file size and upload them as well, you can showcase how some of your customers are wearing it. Those are really great options. In terms of cutouts on a white background, I think you mean like if you have an image of the product or a smaller piece and you're just like putting it in front of a white background. You don't always have to be on a white background. It just looks really clean for like for your product features when you're highlighting those specific features. So I'm going to use the running shoes as an example. If I'm highlighting what does my running shoe look like, what does the top of my running shoe look like, what does the bottom of the running shoe look like, those ones are commonly done on white backgrounds because they allow all the other colors in the shoe to show, as well as all the shadows and the features, so that people can get a clear idea of what it looks like. It doesn't mean every single picture has to be a white background, but if you're a poor photographer like me, you probably should start with your product photos all with white backgrounds.
Great, thank you. We have a question here. Hopefully it's not like too technical, but we'll do our best. So we have one from Kristen that says, for iPhones, the extension is JPEG in caps. So capital J, P, and G. Will that affect the image when it's not lowercase JPG?
It shouldn't, no.
Okay.
Not to my knowledge. I will confirm though, Kristen, just to be safe. I will write it down and I will send Alicia the answer.
Perfect. Sounds good. A question here from Carolyn that says, do you know if Shopify automatically changes the currency for customers in a different country?
Yes. So give me 2 seconds. I'm just writing down your JPEG versus little one. Okay. So we can, but without making it too complicated. You can show your customers what they're going to be charging in their site, and it will do the conversion for them. So if I'm buying something from an American site, I'm buying and paying in Canadian dollars, and I'm seeing it on my site in Canadian dollars, but the underlying store currency is still primarily US dollars. So I'll give you a Canadian example. If I have a Canadian store, I charge my customers in Canadian dollars. However, if someone from the US is visiting the site, I can enable a currency piece so that they're seeing all of the prices in US dollars. And then when they check out, it's charging their card in US dollars, and that's being converted into Canadian before it hits my bank account, so that I don't have to have 1,000 bank accounts in 1,000 different currencies. It's all going to be converted on the back end by the banks. The only thing is they may pay like on their credit card, like that conversion fee.
Makes sense.
On the card.
Okay. We have a clarifying question here that says, Emily, can you please reiterate the differences between JPEG, PNG, GIF or GIF, and thumbnails? Which one is best to use? Thank you.
Yes. So we'll start with thumbnails. Thumbnails are kind of separate than those images. Thumbnails are a type of image. So when you're thinking of product pages, there are your product page itself, which has a number of images, and those images are comprised of like the JPEG type images, PNG, GIF. Thumbnails would be when you're going to a website or you're on the homepage and you see all of their products that they have or on their collections. Like if you were to look at new this week and you were looking at all the products they offer, they have those tiny little squares of product. Those are thumbnails. So thumbnails have a slightly different purpose than them. it's good to have thumbnails on your site, but they can slow, having too many, if you had 1,000 products on your site, each with their own thumbnail, like sometimes that can slow things down. In terms of JPEG, PNG, GIF, and that's it. And I'm to Nick, I think I see your question there that says, am I trying to say GIF? Yes, that is what I am trying to say. So I guess it is a GIF or a GIF, however you prefer to say it. Basically, JPEG are the oldest kind of image. And so what happens with them is they're really good for e-commerce because they can be compressed the smallest. But if you have the same JPEG image that you're saving over and over and over again, the quality of the photo, the actual like pixelation in that can start to fade. GIFs, on the other hand, are they're larger file formatted. They allow for different kinds of movement and things like that, but you lose some of the image quality. So if you have a really high quality photo, it's not going to look as clear in GIF. It may be a little blurrier, and they have a larger file size. So they essentially load slower on your page, which means the last piece of that around GIFs is so they're commonly used for logos or smaller things. They're not an ideal format. PNG or PNG is what I was calling them. Are super high quality photos. They do not lose any quality or image components as they're resaved or saved constantly. So you can use them a lot. They're used really commonly in marketing, like in internal marketing, to be put into landing pages and things like that, because they keep their image well, and they actually offer more colors. But the challenge with them is because they're so high quality, they can also be a larger file size. So if you're going to use PNG, or you want to use PNG-8, which is the same format. So, and PNG, GIF, and JPEG are all of those like dot at the end when you're saving things, just like if you're saving an Excel file or a doc, it finishes with dot, like period, doc, DOC. So that's the same concept with those. I hope that helps.
Okay, great. We have a question here. It says, if we are selling a service rather than a product, how could we sell that on the product pages?
Yeah, so it depends a little bit on the service and what your go-to-market strategy is. In terms of selling services, so if you were selling not gym memberships, but like personal training, what we've seen people do is sell them in blocks. So you're either buying like one session, or you're buying 5 sessions, or you're buying 10 sessions. And so people get to select what their sessions are, and you can build out the pricing like that. That allows people to just kind of go through the conversion. You would have to track or use an app to track on the back end. Has Emily attended all her sessions? Like, has she used up all 10? Okay, when I text you to set up the next session, feeling like, hey, Emily, I need you to go back and actually purchase your next package. We don't get used as commonly. We can, but we're not as commonly used for like booking of hair salons or things like that, that also require that appointment scheduling piece in it. There are a number of apps on our app store that do it. And unfortunately, you'd kind of have to rely on those to supplement that scheduling piece. But often hair salons and businesses like that can use Shopify. They use them to like sell their products and things like that. And then they use another booking tool to actually schedule and check out those appointments. The final option is if you have a service, or you're a consultant, or you're doing any consulting like that, you can use a request a quote app, which would basically let you say, instead of having your prices on your site, you would describe what the prices are and what kind of some of the different packages are. And then there would be a button on your site instead of add to cart that would say request a quote. You would click on it, you maybe enter in some additional information, and then that gets sent to you as a store owner for you to be able to either ask one of your team members to reach out to, or for you to reach out to and call them directly and dig into those details, and then provide them with that custom price.
Awesome, thank you. We have 2 more questions here, so just putting it out there for anyone else who wants to submit a question before we wrap up here. We have a clarifying question from Rima. It says, is there a longer trial for Shopify? It was mentioned in the last webinar.
Yes, so I can only find the 14-day trial. I will ask one more team if there's something specific that I am missing in my Googling, but I will double check. So thank you for the reminder.
Awesome. Okay, and then last question here from Jenny. It says, regarding alt attributes, are there any words you should stay away from? For example, I sell cookies, but I'm guessing the word tasty is overused and therefore pointless, question mark.
Yeah, so I would stay away from those words that are overused or are not necessarily are going to like be too long. I'll give you another example. I have a better example. Let me just remember around cars. So, okay. Just like you would when you're thinking of like a car, to your point about tasty or overused, plain language, you wouldn't want to say like buy now, cheap, tasty, delicious, yummy, all those things, right? You're trying to just describe the attributes of it. So it would be like, if you're selling cookies, maybe it's chocolate chip or chewy chocolate chip cookies. And then that would be your piece. Because like chewy is technically a descriptor versus tasty, which is a really common one. So again, for like a car, I'm going to use the car because it happens to be the example I typed up. But if you were selling a Ford Mustang, is everyone familiar with them? They're the muscle cars that Ford sells, right? You wouldn't say like Ford Mustang, muscle car, buy now, cheap, best sale, best on price. You'd probably just say red Ford Mustang, 2017, right? Things that aren't going to overwhelm it either, because if you have too much text, it makes it hard for it to pull and everyone has it. So it's not going to move you any higher because you're looking for things that are unique, but are also going to be descriptive enough for someone who maybe can't see the image.
Awesome. Just one more question here. I'm seeing in the chat twice. So it says, can you further explain the status of draft or active?
Yes. So an active status means that your product is available online. So if we use Jenny's cookies, if Jenny's trying out a bunch of new recipes and she's not sure which cookies she wants to post on her website, she could build all those products. So like chocolate chip cookies, lemon shortbread cookies. I'm going to be craving so many cookies after this. Sorry. Chocolate chip cookies, lemon shortbreads, cheddar shortbreads, gingerbread cookies. And she's not sure that she's really perfected the recipe, but she knows she's going to get it. She could build the product on her product page, outline all the description, the cost, the amount that she's planning on selling, how much it would cost to ship, everything like that, and leave it in draft status so that none of her customers, when they're going to her website, are going to be seeing it. They're not going to try and check out. And then she's like, actually, I don't have this product yet or anything like that. So it's in draft. It's not available for purchase. Once she's perfected her recipe and she's ready to outsell Starbucks chocolate chip cookies, she can go back into that same product. And rather than having to now enter everything in at this time, she can just change the status from draft to available. And you can change your statuses from draft to available either while the password is on the site. I would suggest when you're first building your site and you have your secure password, that you build all the products that you're planning to launch with, and any that you know are you're going to launch in a couple months. Leave the ones that you're going to launch in a couple months in draft so that you can go back in and iterate on them. Activate, like switch all the ones that you're planning to launch with to active prior to removing your website, so that when you first launch, the last thing you want to do is you've put in all the effort, you've built out a great theme, and then you're launching your site, you're driving traffic to it, but you haven't actually made all of your things active. I would make them active either by setting the time so that it does it automatically when you're building it, if you know you're going to launch on Friday at noon, or by just going into the products that you want to launch and marking them active before you remove the password, so that people don't show up at your site and not find anything there because you're still in the process of activating products. Does that help?
Awesome. That's great. That's amazing. I think it's time to kind of wrap up. Emily, as always, lots of really great information. We're getting a ton of thank yous in, saying thank you again for a great session. A reminder to everyone that, again, these sessions are recorded, so we will go ahead and send you the recording through registration emails. Go and watch Emily's from Tuesday, which was another fantastic session, and join us next week. We are going beyond your online store with another member of the Shopify team named Amy. So feel free to register for that. That's Tuesday and Thursday next week. As always, Emily, thank you so much. And we hope to see everyone again soon.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, Alicia.
Thanks.